Hey everyone! In this particular video, I'm going to be referencing an interview, or at least a portion, a segment of the interview by Philip Dodd of the BBC, interviewing Jordan Peterson. And in this particular segment of that interview, they're touching down and talking about the fundamental and philosophical aspects or principles that is a representation of what does individual freedom and liberty entail. What is the whole point of personal responsibility and individual liberty? What is this philosophical endeavor? What is the representation of freedom, of human freedom and liberty? What does it mean fundamentally? Now I'm going to be, like I say, I'm going to be referencing by playing this 15 or 16 minute portion of that interview and intervening with my own personal opinion in regards to the pretense or the information presented within it. So let's start now.
Jordan Peterson joins me now. You're clearly involved centrally in the culture wars. Were you drafted into these wars, or were you a volunteer?
I would say a little of column A and a little of column B, but mostly I volunteered.
Why?
Because the government stepped outside of its mandate and dared to bring in legislation compelling speech. And that had never been done in the history of British common law. And they did it in the guise of a false compassion and in ignorance and in willful blindness. They made a big mistake. And so there's no way, once I had read the policies and understood what was happening, that I was going to stand for that, insofar as I had any choice.
It's the case, though, that common courtesy leads us to address people in ways that they feel easy with. You're happy with that as an account?
Sure, and thrilled with common courtesy. But it's a whole different thing when the government uses an ideologically motivated claim of compassion to justify implementing careless, unbelievably careless compelled speech legislation.
But you're not against the state's intervention in all areas of life, are you?
Well, it depends on the areas.
No, but in principle, I mean,
No,
there are some.
no.
You're not an Oklahoma guy who wants to go back into the woods and get rid of the state.
No, I'm actually quite a moderate, centrist type of person.
So this is one area where obviously I would love to have a conversation with Jordan Peterson, because I believe that he is someone that actually cares about and has this pursuit of knowledge, right? He seems to be more than willing to reject any collectivist or preemptive endeavor that involves the use of preemptive violence or forced subjugation as a pretense or a means to an end. He's an individualist. He's someone who described himself as a classical liberal. And the modern iteration of the classical liberal today, which would be defined as a libertarian. Now, there's two aspects of libertarianism. There's the political libertarian that does still give some leeway, some discrepancy, some exception to the rule, to the norm for certain political actors, that they get to do things that aren't proper for the rest of us. I would challenge Jordan Peterson, which is what philosophical libertarians such as myself or Stefan Molyneux, it's just a matter of expanding upon the intellectual endeavors and the fundamental principles that you hold or espouse, right? So since libertarians, which we'll get to shortly, libertarians are something that Jordan Peterson acknowledges that he kind of falls in line with that kind of mentality himself, and we'll play that very shortly. But it's if you espouse or accept the fundamental principles of libertarianism, then if you're willing to be scientific or objective regarding those fundamental rules, those fundamental principles, and what that means, right? The universality of what that means, then I don't know how you can make exceptions, right? So think about it. As a parent, if you don't believe in using preemptive violence or force towards other people or theft, right? What exceptions do you allow yourself where you can do that? I mean, that should be so minute and so limited in scope that it would be like a perfect example, an easy scenario, or at least something that we would all understand or at least associate with is, okay, I don't want to use preemptive force or violence towards other people, right? But if I see an imminent threat coming towards me, whether it's from an individual or a group, right, or multiple individuals, am I going to wait for them to inflict harm on me before I stand up and defend myself? No, because who knows how much harm they'll inflict me initially. It might be enough that I won't be able to defend myself. So preemptive violence, when there's a direct imminent threat, that's somewhere where all libertarians, that's literally enshrined in the philosophy of libertarianism is, yes, we don't use preemptive force or violence, theft, or coercion towards other people, but if it's coming at us, yeah, you better believe we understand and we promote the use of all force, all violence, by any means necessary when it comes to they succumb or you. When it comes to the choice of you or your opponent, if you don't choose to be the one, the last man standing per se, right? And I'm not saying that it should ever always come to that, but if it's you or them, of course you should always choose you, right? And I'm pretty sure your family or those who rely on you or depend on you would be very appreciative of the fact that you're willing to stand up and defend yourself against your opponents. So that's Libertarianism 101, the NAP 101.
Okay, listen.
I mean, I'm from Western Canada, and we're a little more on the libertarian end of things, but not in any. I'm a Canadian, you know. Canadian political radicals are just not that common.
So he literally admitted that Canadians, they still have this quasi mentality that we still need a political ruling class to tell us what to do, right? Rather than having that genuine libertarian fundamental aspect or mentality or psychology in our brain, like our American counterparts, was like, yeah, I don't need a ruler. I just need rules. I just need a baseline philosophy that tells me what's fundamentally moral and principled in any approach, whether it's social or economical, in how I deal or associate with other human beings. But he's admitting, Jordan Peterson, like this is one of those areas that he's being completely honest and objective in his approach, and I appreciate the man for that, although I would love to challenge him in some of these positions that he takes, this stance that he takes, and maybe someday I will. Hopefully Jordan Peterson someday, if I reach out to him, will give me the opportunity to be able to challenge some of the political orthodoxy or some of the narratives that he's putting forth and presented, especially in a situation such as this.
Your book is marinated in religious language.
Yes.
Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. That's got the cadences of the Bible behind it about setting your house in order. I was brought up an English Methodist. I want to know, what is your religious framework? I'm just back from New York, so you're clearly a North American Protestant.
Yes, I think that's very fair to say. That's my background. My family was a member of my mother in particular was a member of the mainstream Protestant church in Canada, which happened to be the United Church. Although I was disenchanted with religious thinking by the time I was about 12 or 13. It's not that there's anything special about that, but I became very much interested in the role that narrative plays in orienting people in life, and delved deep into it when I was studying totalitarianism, and which I did in depth. Well, I have been doing that for 40 years, really. And that led me down to the deepest of stories. And by definition, the deepest of stories are religious. I mean, it's the fact that they're deep that makes them religious, or vice versa. And so I've strived to understand what those stories mean.
Okay, that makes it sound very scholarly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not with you. It's inside you. It's not you are religious, aren't you?
Well, it would depend to some degree.
No, don't get epistemological on me. Okay, what I'm asking you is, you're a believer. Now, of course, what it means to believe is different, but the reason I'm interested in this is your commitment to individual responsibility has a religious history to it.
It has a religious aspect to it, sure. It has a religious layer to it, let's say. And I would say that the battle that I found myself involved in wasn't a political battle or even a psychological battle. As far as I'm concerned, it's actually a theological battle. So because I see what's happening in the universities as the pushback of a fundamentally collectivist viewpoint against the cardinal Western stance that the individual is sovereign. And
hold on there.
So this is actually one of the most important areas that Jordan Peterson touches down on, and not just in this video, but in many of his past interviews and videos that he's propagated so far, is the respect of the individual. Rather than the whole collectivist endeavor, which is to sacrifice the individual for some concept of the greater good. And when you think about that concept, the greater good, what does that represent? What does that mean? Right? We're all individuals. We can all be held to responsibility and accountability as individuals. But any collective endeavor, which is encompassing groups or collectives, how can you point to any collective or group and hold them responsible when there's so many variances, so many nuances to the individuals that are a representation of that collective endeavor or of that collective ideology or of that collective?
That's where we begin. There is, of course, Emerson's great essay on self-reliance, Frank Sinatra's My Way. America has the deepest belief in the individual, at least one strand of American thought, but that doesn't exhaust the West. There are lots more communal versions of life. In fact, one of the things I would have said, and I'm not a Christian now, one of the things I would have said about Christianity is it believes in the communal and in the collective. That's why people go to church.
Well, I would say it believes in the proper relationship between the individual and the collective, not that it believes in the collective. And I mean, and I think I'm fully in that tradition, because I think that the way that...
Here, let me just break this down real quick before Jordan Peterson does it in his own method, in his own way, is I care a lot for my family, right? For my community, for my neighbors, for my coworkers. But it's the individual, whether it's I can't point to my neighbors and say, oh, my neighbors are bad. No, might be bad actors within my neighborhood, and I'll point to the individuals who are. Just like within my family. I love and respect the family unit, the concept of the family unit, and what that represents. But I will always point out the individuals who are a representation of moral acts and behaviors, as opposed to those who are within my collective or my family or my community, but they are not, holding themselves to a particular moral standard and going against the orthodoxy or the ideology of respecting the individual, respecting the individual aspects of what it is to be a free human being. It just comes down to simple baseline rules and philosophical principles. Is I'll respect you. You can be like, perfect example. Look at LGBTQ, religious freedoms. Listen, if you can do things that I disagree with all day, every day, just don't impose them on me. And I might try to tell you that that's probably not the best way, the best case scenario for you going forward, or for your community, or for your life, or for your future offspring, or for your community, or for your country, or whatever, right? But I'm going to talk to you as an individual, not as a group, not as a collective. I'm not going to suggest that you are a representation of some overarching umbrella collective. You're a human being. You're an individual, and I'm going to hold you personally responsible and accountable to what you say and to what you do.
You want to orient yourself in life is to set yourself up so that you're taking care of yourself properly, but so that you're doing it in a manner that benefits your family and your community. And that...
Not that exactly, well said. So just like myself, listen, if I fell for the collectivist mindset and just perceived of myself as a sacrificial lamb for the greater good, my family's not going to respect me. I'm not going to do the right things for my particular family, right? Or those I truly care about, or I deem worthy of my respect, of my morality. I'm just going to sacrifice myself for those who just, share my bloodline or skin color. And there's some people that might very well fit within that paradigm that are really bad or immoral people, or predominantly do more immoral things than they do moral. Because that's the other thing. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not black and white. There's all kinds of gray areas when you're talking about individuals. They might be bad today, but they could be good tomorrow. They might be bad in some areas in their life. There might be some good in some areas in life. So once again, individual acts, individual people, and individual responsibility and individual accountability eliminates all these collectivist bullshit endeavors where you get to just, paint everyone with a broad brush, which is such a failure on so many levels.
All of those levels of organization have to be serving one another, and that they can.
Now, I understand that, and that's a perfectly reasonable position, but it mustn't be conflated with the Western view is the individual is primary, because that's historically not the case.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think that the emphasis on the idea of the logos in the West and the fact that that individuals are regarded in some sense as the carriers of that does make the individual primary from a conceptual perspective. Because one of the questions is...
But Catholicism doesn't even believe in that.
Who cares about if whether Catholicism, a particular religious ideology, listen, I mean, think about it. Perfect example, right? Groupthink, majority or mob rule. Go back to Galileo or anyone that was trying to espouse, hey, hold on. Or Newton, right? Or something. Whether you're talking about gravity or the fact, like I say, Galileo's like, wait a minute, we're not the center of the universe. Hey, I've done some visual observations and some scientific, some objective observations that suggest that, you know what? Yeah, we're not the center of the universe. We're just a planet rotating this thing, the star, but we call it the sun, our sun. And there's multiple planets that revolve around this sun. And it just happens that we're at a particular plane that's close enough, yet far enough away from the sun that we can have sustained human or life species that are propagated on the planet Earth that fits this particular setting that we happen to inhabit. But I mean, if you went back those many hundreds of years ago and were living in the times of Galileo or Isaac Newton or others who challenged the orthodoxy of the establishment of the ruling class, you were a heretic. You were an outsider. You were this weird, obstructive, intrusive individual that was challenging the political or religious orthodoxy of the established ruling class. But yet, if we look at things today, you understand that that individual, that one person, was correct objectively, right? Not just as far as subjective opinion. Objectively, yes, the earth is not the center of the universe, and we know this to be true, conclusively. No arguments about it from most people, right? It's just accepted norm that yes, the earth is not the center of the universe. But yet, once again, back in the day, it was pure blasphemy to suggest or put forth a narrative such as this. So this is why the importance of respecting the individual is so important and so profound in the psychology and the philosophy of what it means to be a modern and post-Enlightenment era individual that respects the fundamental knowledge and principles that has taken, countless generations to get to this point. And a lot of geniuses that have come up with these concepts, have conjured up these concepts in their mind, but based on scientific-like observations of human interactions, human cooperation, and human existence. That's what libertarianism is all about, is rejecting political orthodoxy or ideology and using your brain, challenging, questioning the narrative that has been jammed in your head. And that's a beautiful thing.
Catholicism, one of the founding forms of Christianity in the West, that doesn't believe in this wonderful American Protestant view of yours.
Well, why would you say that belief isn't held? Because of the emphasis on the importance of the church?
Because you can only survive, you can only go to heaven through the church. It's communal, it's collective. Let me give you an example. You and I are both old enough to have watched Spartacus, the Stanley Kubrick film. There's a Stanley Kubrick film. There's a great moment in there when Kirk Douglas stands up and says, "I am Spartacus." And everybody else around him stands up and says, "I am Spartacus." That is the act of a collective communal sense. It's not an individual responsibility. It's, to use an old European term, it's solidarity.
Well, I'm going to stand by my claim. I think that if you distribute the Christian belief systems along a spectrum, you'd see that the Protestants are more individualistic than the Catholics. I'm certainly willing to grant you that. But I still think that the idea that the individual is to be regarded as of paramount importance with regards to such doctrines as the salvation of the individual soul and let's say, the eternal value of the soul is still something that puts the individual in a sovereign position conceptually. And so that doesn't eliminate the importance of the collective in the least, because it is also very much about balance. You could say that the kingdom of God is within you and without you.
Exactly. It's all about gaining and understanding the proper balance, right? So, perfect example, my family matters tremendously to me. My community, my neighbors, my co-workers, a lot of them matter a lot to me because they help me in so many areas, in so many ways, in so many regards. But as a free individual that has self-esteem, that has self-respect, I have to place a priority on me. I cannot sacrifice myself to anyone else and place them as having some pretense of authority or supremacy over me in the philosophical aspect, in the philosophical sense, right? Now, in some areas, right, in particular venues or competitive nature or competitive venues, yeah, they might have supremacy in some way. But as a human being, freedom requires that we understand and respect the fact that I have to come first without placing myself as an individual at the center of what it means to be an individual. Well, then the minute I step outside that bounds, I've allowed myself to now be just a sacrificial lamb, a sacrificial animal, a sacrificial being for some concept of a greater good. And what does the greater good entail? Because the greater good encompasses all individuals. And as we know, well, there's good individuals, there's bad individuals, there's good individuals that are good most of the time and bad some of the time, or there's people that are bad most of the time and good. So there is no individual that you can point to or particular principle or idea or ideal in a group. There is in the individual. That's the fundamental difference. And that's something that I definitely agree with Jordan Peterson. But I find that he's still trying to play that minarchist realm. He's trying to play within the minarchist realm, which is what political libertarians do, which is what the classical liberals did. And as much as I greatly respect and appreciate the classical liberals or even the modern philosophical or even the modern political libertarians for their advancement or their attempts to advance humans towards more oriented, more aligned with individual rights and freedoms. Is stop leaving areas in your mind. Stop leaving this small area in your mind where it's okay to use monopolized force and preemptive violence as a means to an end. Right? Even when I was reading Jordan Peterson's book, I noticed that he was a little bit more conducive or condoned the use of violence towards children to correct their behaviors. I mean, yes, it works, and anyone can make an argument that if you use preemptive force or violence, that you can get, whether it's a children or individuals within a society, to conform if you use violence. But have you created a healthy society? Have you created a healthy, well-adjusted child by using preemptive force and violence? I would suggest not necessarily. And that reciprocal effect, if they constantly regurgitate and repeat that kind of pretense, that kind of promotion of preemptive violence or force, or theft, which is what the state represents in as far as taxation is concerned, constantly promoting theft, forced subjugation, and slavery, well, you just constantly expand upon and create ever entrenched, ever foundational aspects of being subject, serfs, and slaves to a particular ruling class or a particular ruler. Jordan Peterson is all supposedly about honest, the philosophy of individualism, the pursuit of knowledge. So Jordan, listen, I'm going to put this out to you right now, and I will reach out to you. I'll send you a message. I have not done so far, but I'll send out messages. I'll tweet you. I'll figure out a way, but we really need to have a conversation because I don't know. I don't know where you're trying to draw those boundaries, those lines. And I think you need to be challenged in some area, in some regards, on where you think that line should be. Not hating on you. Mad respect for you for doing what you're doing. But hey, that's what it is, right? We have to be willing and open to challenges to our particular ideological spectrum or our ideological preferences or our stances on these kinds of issues. That is a representation of how we cohabitate and coexist amongst each other, whether it's domestically, nationally, or globally. These kinds of talks need to take place, and I'm one of the people that I'm in a perfect position and have the capacity and the willingness to challenge some of your preconceived notions or even your own orthodoxy. So I hope maybe someday we'll have a conversation.
Without you, outside of you, at the same time. And I think that's a reasonable way of looking at it, because it's a matter of harmony.
No, but forgive me, but you don't say that. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. You're giving priority to an internal transformation. Now, one response to that is, why can't you do both at the same time? Set your own house in order and set the world's house in order at the same time.
That's a good question. I think it's because...
But that's not what you say.
No, and it's not something I agree with. I think the reason for that fundamentally is because this is part of my training as a social scientist, is that the first thing you want to do is the least amount of harm possible. And if you put your own house in order, the probability that you're going to bring grief to the world is very, very low. Whereas if you start meddling in the function of higher order systems, especially when you don't understand them, the probability that you'll translate your good intentions into proper outcome is very, very low.
Okay, let me give you back a historical sociological example. Let's just imagine you'd have had the opportunity to talk to Martin Luther King. And you'd have said, don't go on those civil rights marches until you sort out your personal ethics. You wouldn't have gone down that route, would you? What Martin Luther King did, and not only Martin Luther King, because you quote Tolstoy, and Tolstoy in War and Peace is endlessly meditating. Does, as it were, Napoleon get pushed across the Rubicon by the troops, or does he lead the troops? These are historiographical arguments. But actually, you can't wait to set your own house in perfect order, because we're dead before that happens. And second, civil rights wouldn't have happened on your principle.
Well, I don't know if it's reasonable to view what might be true for exceptional individuals as something that should be made the common norm. Like what I was objecting to in that chapter were two things, I guess. One was the proclivity of universities to teach 18-year-old and 19-year-old people that their primary obligation is to be an activist for sociological transformation in the world, which I think is a dreadful mistake.
It's a dreadful mistake because they're 18-year-old students, or it's a dreadful mistake?
No, it's a dreadful mistake because they're 18-year-old students. They have more proximal things to attend to, and they don't know anything. They seriously don't know anything. And so,
yeah, they do know things. Come on, 18-year-olds do know things. You've got children, I've got children. Both of them are older than 18 now. I wouldn't have liked to sit opposite my 18-year-old and tell them they didn't know anything.
Well, they know enough to put certain things immediately in front of them in order to attend to their education, but they don't know enough to risk experimenting with large-scale transformations of economic systems that they don't understand in the least.
Okay.
Not that that's the case for many people. And the other problem with the activist ethos, which is partly what I was objecting to, is that it's very easy for your bitterness to manifest itself as the hypothetically altruistic desire for social change. And I think that happens far more often than people are willing to admit. And
so basically what Jordan Peterson is saying, if you want to break it down and just put it into a very short, straight to the point soundbite is, don't tell people how to live their lives until you have figured it out on yourself and have proven that you've done it so well that you are genuinely, morally, intellectually, socially, and economically superior to your counterparts, right? And you can show with clear and concise language or examples or reference material that, hey, look, see? It's all there. The proof is in the pudding, just like science, right? Just like, think about gravity. I don't have to say that I'm a master of understanding what gravity is. I just say, look, I can do an experiment where I drop something. It'll drop at a certain speed or a particular rate of speed, and it's going to fall in one particular direction towards the center of the earth, right? And you can do this experiment here in Canada, US, in Europe, in China, in Africa, anywhere around the world, in Australia, and it'll work out, and the representation is correlated no matter where you go. So it's universally consistent. That's the most important thing that we got to be talking about here, is anything that's entrenched in moral or philosophical principles, or how we should cohabitate and coexist amongst each other, or how we deal with creating or observing the world around us, it has to be all universally consistent and objectively true. There are lots of things that we can be subjective in, right? Gray. I like wearing a gray shirt. I kind of like gray. Some people don't like gray. That's completely subjective, and there is no right or wrong. You don't have to like gray. If you don't like gray, that's your choice. And those things are completely subjective and open to interpretation. And we should all accept that. But is theft right or wrong? We would all accept that theft is wrong. Taken from others, that, you know, something that's not, doesn't rightfully belong to you. That's wrong. And that too is, once again, universally consistent and objectively moral and proven to be consistent with what it is to be a good, decent human being. Same with using preemptive force or violence towards other people. We can all be universally consistent and moral in our stance if we prevent ourselves or reject the concept of using preemptive violence or force towards other people. And if you do that, you look out there in your observable world, like the reality that you live in, and you'll find out that, yeah, it's those people that don't use preemptive violence, force, or theft or coercion towards other people that have actually created the benefit of a peaceful society. Anyways, I'm pretty much done with this video. It's a couple minutes longer, but I think the most important points in this particular article, in this particular video, has been covered. So don't really need to let it go on much longer. This video's already gone past a half hour, so I'm going to tie it up now. But once again, I'm hoping to be able to have a conversation with Jordan Peterson, or if any of these BBC hosts, although they don't want to talk to me, because I don't give them no freebies. I don't give them no. Yeah, if you talk to me, yeah, you're going to have to deal with a lot more pushback. I have no particular group preferences. I have no tribe, other than those who I deem worthy, other than those who respect and promote the individual like I do. Skinny Libertarian, and I love liberty.